Hi, I'm Dr. Katie Berlin.
And I'm Dr. Beth Molleson.
Thanks for joining us in the Veterinary Breakroom. This is where we have shorter conversations about relevant topics in veterinary medicine and out of veterinary medicine. And today we're going to be talking about something that's really near and dear to my heart, and I know it's important to you too, Beth. We're going to be talking about, since this episode is going to be coming out in January, and we know that this time of year can be really hard in terms of everybody around you seems to have goals to lose weight or get in shape or make a lot of commitments around health and appearance and habits, and that can be kind of a trying time, whether or not we are aware of it. And so we're going to be talking about that. So Beth, what are you most interested in talking about today when it comes to diet and wellness culture?
Yeah, like you said, Katie, this is a topic that always feels near and dear to my heart, as I'm sure a lot of really every generation, but as a millennial, I'll speak to millennials. Anyone that, grew up in the 90s, early 2000s sort of diet culture, like anytime this topic gets brought up, I immediately have feelings. So, I mean, I think one of the things I am excited to talk about is I do feel like things in that realm and the whole New Year's resolution as far as it pertains to bodies and weight has changed for the better in recent years or decades. Um, so yeah, focusing on that I think is important. But like you said, Katie, I think any of us who see this New Year's roll around and who have a complicated relationship with the idea of diets and bodies and new goals and wellness feel that little bit of anxiety well up every January 1st.
Yeah, and it can be so tempting, right? It could happen any time of year. Like, this is an important topic all year, but there's something about the idea of a reset, of like a fresh start, that is so tempting. It's the same thing, like my diet's going to start Monday, or like I'm going to do what I want over the holidays, but January 1st, like I'm going to be a different person who does different things, makes different choices.
Mhm.
Like that is super tempting, the clean slate. And I am definitely a person who responds to that energy. I'm like a goal
Mhm.
setter, and I like to have like a definitive start and then like a streak, so like every day I did this. And it can be really damaging
Mhm.
because I feel like then we become a slave to those things. And as soon as we invariably stray from what we told ourselves we were going to do, then it's like this whole slippery slope of like, I am a failure. I'm not good enough. Why is everybody else doing this and not me? And the flip side of that is that there are a lot of people who don't do this,
Mhm.
or who can't do it, or who will do it, and yet they're the end result that they might get from the same goals is going to look totally different from someone else's. And we tend to gloss over that, I think. Like, I do agree that in today's culture, compared to when we grew up as, the millennial, exennial generation of the, 90s Friends type
Mhm.
TV, we were seeing a lot of just like outright fat phobic messaging. Weight inclusivity was not a thing, like
Right.
body positivity was not a thing. Everybody wanted to look the same. And
Mhm.
that same was very, very small. And I do think it's a little bit better, but there's still so much bias out there that we don't even maybe register because
Mhm.
it's dressed up differently now.
Yep.
And I think when we talk about stuff like this, a lot of times we're talking about ourselves. We're saying like, "Oh, I want to lose a little bit of weight," or "Oh, these jeans feel really tight," or "Oh, I'm having such a fat day." And yet we do that without a lot of times considering the people around us, not just how they look, but their history and like the emotional um, complexity that everybody's relationship is by the time they get to adulthood with food and weight.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that is particularly relevant when we talk about January 1st and New Year's, is I think a lot of us who have gone through the internal work of not focusing our mindset the way we were all doing decades ago, where there was that one body vision of health. So those of us that are kind of recovering from that influence, so to speak, I feel like January 1st is one of those times where, okay, maybe I'm good at blocking that out the rest of the year, but suddenly everyone else is talking about diets and wellness and fitness. And that is, yeah, very easy to, like you were saying, very easy to succumb to. I'm curious, when you say you see it dressed up differently, how do you feel like it's changed through the years? Like, what do you think that looks like now as compared to how it used to when we talk about that influence from others?
I think it's focused, and this is my own experience and like as somebody who's done a lot of like reading about this stuff, but obviously we are not experts in this. But, you know, I do think that there's a more of a focus on health now versus, and wellness and well-being. And so you can have diets out there marketed as health and wellness when they're still telling adult people to eat 1,200 or 1,400 calories a day. Of course, you're going to lose weight on that. I would also lose all my friends and my job if I was on that diet because I would be a terrible human, because that is, generally speaking, not enough to
Right.
feed an adult human who's like living a life.
Mhm.
And they've even done experiments on this where like if you restrict food too much, that's a guaranteed recipe for fixating on it.
Mhm.
And that's not healthy either, and it's no way to live.
Yep.
And I think a lot of the messaging that I see now is around like be your healthiest self, like, oh, it's not about appearance, it's about how you feel. And I love that messaging, except that it's still weight loss. It's
Mhm.
just designed to make it seem less aggressively appearance based. I feel like in the 90s, nobody cared about like insulting someone's appearance.
Right.
Like they were just getting told on television that they were too fat.
Yeah.
And
Remember Oprah
now,
and her fat buckets?
right, Oprah and the wagon of fat. Yes. Oh my god, I forgot about that. Yeah. If anybody is really into this topic and they don't know about it already, check out the podcast called Maintenance Phase. They'd have a whole episode on Oprah's wagon of fat. It's really good. Anyway, but the point is that, whatever you call it, if you're encouraging people to restrict food, cut out food groups, tone up, like fit into smaller clothes, um, get closer to a more uniform idea of health,
Mhm.
and the way that is quote unquote supposed to look, then that's still a diet, and it's still diet culture, even if it's under a couple of layers of health talk. And there's also a message in there that I really don't like, which is that we are all in control of our health. And Beth, I think you and I, as two people who very recently, like 5 minutes ago, were talking about our health anxiety and like how we go to the doctor way more than a lot of people we know. And we want every little thing checked out. And we want to do all the preventative care because we think that that's like the closest thing we can get to a guarantee that we're not going to get sick or have something go on, which is obviously, not always true. I think we can all agree we're not in control of most aspects of our health. And so the idea that if somebody is in a larger body, that they are unhealthy and therefore, and not making an effort and therefore
Mhm.
deserve, like, if they get sick or develop a chronic disease, versus somebody who's in a smaller body, regardless of how healthy they are internally, we sort of regard them as like more virtuous and more deserving of good health and probably healthier in general anyway, even if we
Yep.
know nothing else about them besides what we look like. And that's, I think, really harmful messaging also.
Yes, absolutely. And I think one of the other ways I have seen this sort of acceptable yet unacceptable messaging come across, like in the workplace or with our friends or whatnot, is the body comments. I think you touched on this a little bit earlier, Katie, but I think is worth discussion because to me, I think that is one of the more socially acceptable yet damaging things that happens, where whether it's a coworker or whomever loses weight and you compliment the way they look. I just, even that one example alone, I'm thinking of the ripple effect that that has amongst, again, let's say a vet team for the sake of this discussion, where somebody that's bigger than that person feels like you are making a comment about them. If you're, complimenting the fact that this person has lost weight and you're saying that that's a good thing, you're making the person who you're complimenting feel like maybe they weren't worthy before and that this is a better version of them. And so I think that's something that I still encounter a lot too, is that sort of open discussion of bodies. And it's funny because my high school friend group, we see each other a lot. We've had several of us who have changed body sizes several times throughout our life, and we have a universal understanding that we just never ever we don't compliment, we just don't talk about our bodies. And it is just like so freeing to be in a group of people that are like that, but so many areas of my life are not. And just how damaging those comments can really be, especially when they're, I don't think a lot of times when we make those comments that it is at all acknowledged or recognized, as having the impact that it does.
Yeah, you're so right, and that's one of the biggest reasons that I really wanted to talk about this, because I think it's we're not I wouldn't pass judgment on anybody who wanted to lose weight or get in shape or, achieve any of those goals, whether they're aesthetic or not, because that's the culture we live in, like, that's fine, that's great, and, exercise makes me feel a lot better, so that's why I do it, but I do think that the way that we talk about ourselves and the way that we talk to other people, um, can be really, really harmful. And thinking about that in terms of like a DEI perspective, there are things you would never say now because that they would be harmful to certain groups, even if not to you. And this is no different, So I think there's two sides of this coin. There's the side where you might compliment someone and you mean nothing but good things for them, you're just like, oh my God, you look amazing. Like, what have you been doing? Are you working out? Like what, and the person might be super flattered. I mean, in today's culture, it's hard not to be flattered if somebody says you look amazing because they've noticed you lost weight. But you have no idea why that's happened if they haven't been the one to tell you. And I have been in the position where like my interest in this topic really spiked a few years ago during the pandemic when I had a terrible breakup the very first weekend of lockdown. And it was unexpected. It was betrayal. It was awful. And we were all so scared, and it was just those first early days were so scary. And I just lost my appetite. And that does not happen to me, but I could not eat. Like I was forcing myself to have smoothies so that I would get some nutrition. But it was like maybe a month to a month and a half where I really just wasn't hungry. And everybody was like, you look so great, like he's going to be so sorry, all that. And they were just trying to make me feel better. But, I'm sitting at home, there's nothing to do. Everybody's still pretty isolated. And it really made me get kind of fixated, on food in a way that I hadn't been since I was very young, where you just think, well, they think I look so amazing now, but like I was starving at that time. Like I had no energy, and what if I gain it back and then they're not going to think I look amazing anymore. And it seems so shallow, but I feel like we've all been there. And the fact is that a lot of times when people lose a significant amount of weight, it comes back. It's just statistics. It's like 95% of the time. And in that case, like, isn't it better to find some other way to compliment that person? You have such a glow. No one would have said that to me then because I did not have a glow. I was like yellow and I was not sleeping. I looked like like death, but I was very skinny, so that was worth a compliment. And, so you have a glow, your energy's amazing. Like I always feel good when I'm around you, like I just, those things really feed your soul as a person to hear. And that they see you and not just your outer shell.
Yeah.
But then I think the other side of it is how you talk about yourself. And you would probably never, I hope, say to a coworker like, oh my God, you're looking like really chubby lately. You wouldn't say that. That at least has become less acceptable. But we'd say that about ourselves all the time.
Right.
We're like, God, I feel so fat today. Like, ugh. I need to like go to the gym twice a day now to get this weight off. And more often than not, those people are perfectly normal size, perfectly
Right.
average size. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with their weight. They just might be a little bit bigger than they were 2 weeks ago, which is a
Right.
normal thing. And everybody around them is suddenly like, well, she's smaller than me. Like, am I too big? Or like, I should be going to the gym too. Or like, if she thinks that about herself, what does she think about me? And the people thinking that might be smaller than that person, but have a history of eating disorders or, fixation on tracking and food and weight and, body dysmorphia. And it's just, you just don't know. And you don't have to look a certain way to have that history or to have a disorder or disordered eating at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to kind of the power of words where so many times, and that's why I think this conversation is important because I think so many times those comments, whether it's about oneself or compliments to someone else, have good intentions, but yet can be so damaging. So I do think it's a really important conversation to have to, yeah, just kind of bring that awareness to what we're saying, especially in the vet world where we're working on these tiny teams all day right next to each other and having these sorts of casual conversations that can breed these discussions. But Katie, with New Year's, is there a different way you feel like you approach New Year's resolutions, or what do you feel like you do to combat that sort of pull or tendency to focus on wellness and weight and all that fun stuff this time of year?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I don't personally make New Year's resolutions because I feel like then I'm just basically guaranteeing that I'm going to disappoint myself. I actually make a list. So like for this year, I had 24 in 2024, and it was like 24 things that I would like to accomplish this
Wow.
year. And it's not a have to; it's a would
Uh-huh.
like to, and I love doing that. So, but it gets harder to think of more and more things every year. That's the only thing. Um, but I'm trying to make my list now for the 25 and 2025, but none of them have to do with weight loss. But
Mhm.
I do think I've heard a few people talk about ways that they like to, like I have a registered dietitian friend who talks about this a lot. And they like to talk about doing more of something rather than doing less of something. So like, we know that restricting and cutting things out just makes you want them. It's why like you're like, oh, I can't have Reese's peanut butter cups in the house because, when you have a bag, you're going to want to go
Mhm.
through them like a lot faster
Mhm.
than maybe you would want to. Um, and I discovered that if you just have Reese's cups in the house most of the time, like you stop caring so much.
Yep.
And but if you eat more vegetables, you have less room for stuff like that. At least that's the idea. I feel like there's always room for Reese's cups, but I think the idea of incorporating more of something rather than cutting something out feels like you're rewarding your body rather than punishing it, and I really love that way of thinking. So like, I'm going to meditate for 5 minutes every morning, or I'm going to, go for a walk at lunch 3 times a week, even if it's just around the block,
Mhm.
stuff like that versus like, I'm going to cut out TV time or I'm going to cut out chocolate because that just makes you really want that TV or really want that chocolate.
Right.
I
Absolutely.
mean,
I mean,
me anyway,
yes.
makes me
I
want it.
certainly lived that for, years. Have I ever told you about my Cheeto obsession, Katie? Something about that
No.
you just said reminded me of this. I think it was your Reese Cups. Like, I love Cheetos. One of my favorite. Never thought I'd be talking about this on the podcast, but I love Cheetos. I remember when I was like 4, maybe asking my mom, like, "Do you know when you're gonna die before you die?" And she's like, "Oh, weird question from you, but okay." She's like, "It depends." And I was like, "Oh, I just hope I know first so I can eat as many Cheetos as I want before I die." Which one definitely speaks to the culture I was being raised in, where clearly restriction was a very heavy focus. But two, a few years ago, we went on vacation. With my husband, and he bought Cheetos on vacation, and he was like, "I haven't had these in years. I love them." And ever since then, he has kept Cheetos in our house. And for like 6 months, I was like, "Sean, no, I cannot. You can't keep buying these. These were a vacation food. We cannot have Cheetos in our house." Long story short, years later, we now always have Cheetos in our house. I don't. I never eat them. Like I couldn't
Yeah,
really care less about the Cheetos because they are always there. So have you read the book Intuitive Eating? I'm sure you
yeah,
have read all sorts of intuitive eating. I find that's a
yes.
great resource for anyone wanting to
We'll put a
sort of,
link in the show notes to that
I
because
think
it's a
that's a
good
great
one.
idea. It's a great one to sort of start changing your mentality for those of us that have spent decades with that good old New Year's resolution, strong messaging.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I'm curious to get your thoughts on, Katie. I sometimes feel, again, you touched on this a little bit about how that messaging has kind of covertly shifted over the years from not always just being about being skinny, but kind of wellness in general. And I almost feel like that's where I'm seeing it more lately. And maybe it's just the side of social media I found myself on, but just things like almost scare tactics about food dyes and toxins and black spatulas. And like, I almost feel like it's coming from me at every angle now. And it's like, okay, well, now that we don't as openly equate thinness with being healthy, like, I don't know. It's almost like that messaging is still finding its way, that messaging that I'm not doing everything I could to be
Mm-hmm.
to control my health, things like that is coming at me from every angle. I don't know. I kind of find that exhausting.
It's totally exhausting. The like, well, if I get sick now, it's my fault. It's because of something I didn't do, or like I
Hmm.
didn't get this test, or I ate too much red dye number
Hmm.
5 or whatever. And especially when it comes to kids, like I'm not a mom, but you are, and I bet that's terrifying to think that you're feeding your kids something that's going to make them sick and they don't even know. And I I think that's a very close relative of this because, tied to it so much is these like totally restrictive behaviors
Hmm.
of, there's a recognized eating disorder now called orthorexia, which is basically like an obsession with quote unquote clean eating, or detoxes, when like as doctors, we know that if you have a liver and kidneys, you don't need a detox, those detox for you. And yet it's still knowing that it's still so the pull of them is so strong, especially if like an influencer or somebody that you respect in some other way is touting the benefits of this, and you sort of didn't see it coming and you're like, oh, well, I really like what they say usually. And like they're doing this like detox tea or whatever. No, like I just had a colonoscopy. I'm talking about my colonoscopy on the podcast. I just had a
You're the
colonoscopy
new
because
Katie
I'm
Couric,
old now.
Katie.
Yeah. And yeah, everybody get a colonoscopy when your doctor tells you to, which is usually age 45. And I was so hungry. And like the prep for that is not anywhere near as bad as it used to be, I don't think. But I was still so hungry. And I feel like if I had to do that for 3 or 4 days on like a, detox fast liquid diet or something, I mean, you just feel like crap. And I
Hmm.
think, you know, as people who believe strongly in evidence and science and peer-reviewed research, like it's really important when we're thinking about goals to think about what the evidence actually supports versus what the most widespread messaging is, because they're often
Hmm.
not the same thing. It's the same thing as, we know that like feeding Hills food, my dog has lived to a ripe old age and he's super happy and healthy, but like there's corn in it. But if we believed that messaging, none of us would sell prescription diets, and we believe in that, at least I do and most of my colleagues do. So I think, you were talking about like ways to approach goal setting and health behaviors and habits. And like, I think that's another thing, right? Is yes, you could do a crazy detox diet, but like you also know the things that wouldn't require a dramatic overhaul or complete lifestyle change that you could do more of, that are like
Hmm.
unquestioned, like
Hmm.
eating more vegetables. That is pretty much like a
No one's
given.
arguing with that, right?
Right. Depending which vegetables and which like, diet people you talk to, but I think paleo, there's only certain vegetables you're supposed to eat, but like all of that is hooey. Like vegetables are good for you. They are vitamins. You should eat them. And they also are fiber. They fill you up. you're going to want to eat less junk if you're eating more vegetables. And there are ways that you can make them taste really good. That is not a sexy goal, but
Right.
like it is one that almost everyone can stand by, can do, and can prove.
Yeah.
And maybe do that,
I think that's a really good point, especially this day and age with social media where, anytime you're taking a step with your own health, wellness, whether it's mental or physical, finding something that's evidence-based, because just the way social media runs rampant with the trend of the week, the unproven thought of the week, it's just, yeah, scary. So I think that's a good tip. When you're deciding your goals, make sure it's something evidence-based that you're spending your time on.
Yeah. And, doing things that are healthful. I think too, that's where doing more of things rather than doing less of other things comes in, because you're probably less likely to hurt someone's feelings inadvertently when you're talking about that. Like, oh, I'm going to walk more. Oh, I'm going to do more yoga. I'm going to practice more mindfulness. I'm going to try some new classes this year. Versus like, these are all the things I'm going to cut out, because cutting things out just it sort of vilifies those things, even if you don't say it. And somebody in the room might be doing those things. I'll never forget like sitting in the break room eating a cupcake, because the drug reps, God love them, are always bringing cupcakes and they're amazing. Like, yes, please continue to bring me cupcakes. And I'm eating a cupcake, and somebody comes in and is like, oh, God, there's so much junk food in here, like I'm going to get diabetes just looking at it. Like, okay, A, we're veterinarians. That is not how diabetes works. And B, like I am eating one. It is in my mouth, please, like maybe we could talk about something else, because we're interesting people who have a lot of varied
that would be a fun.
Yeah.
This is a study we need to do, Katie. We can do it. It could be any setting, but for us, we could do vet clinic. The number of times that something related to diet or wellness culture is said offhand throughout the day. Because even though I really do, like I said at the beginning of this episode, I really do see how society has changed in the right direction in a lot of ways when it comes to this issue of weight and thin worshiping. But yet it is still so pervasive. The language is so pervasive and done offhand. So I would love to just witness how many of those, cupcake comments are made throughout the day.
We need one of those clickers, like for doing a cell count,
That's now that there's AI for your differential counts, we can switch that. Do that over.
Well, and before we started recording today, we also touched on something that could be an episode in and of itself, and maybe it will be, because I would love to have a guest come on and talk to us about that. But this bleeds into our interactions with clients too. We still, as a profession, I think, pass judgment on clients who have overweight pets, or pets that we perceive to be overweight. We do have evidence to some extent that pets live longer if they're leaner. But we have to be really careful about extrapolating what we know about pet health into human health. Human health is so much more complex in terms of like our environments, our emotional health, our diets. Food for us is cultural too. It's not just nutrition. And we know that the stress of feeling targeted for being in a larger body is just as harmful in some cases as being in that larger body. In fact, being in a larger body is correlated with a lot of adverse health outcomes, but it's not, the causation is not proved for for a lot of them. Yeah. And so we just really need to be careful about that. And when we're talking to clients about their pet's health, regardless of what that client looks like, and like the story I like to use is, I was never diagnosed with an eating disorder, but I'm a upper middle class white girl from the Northeast who went to a liberal arts college. Like, if I didn't have a disordered relationship with food and weight, like I would be the weirdo.
Would have been a miracle. Yeah.
Yes. And so I have definitely had a history of a complicated relationship with food. And the I remember being in a lecture where the nutritionist, who was lovely, was talking about weight loss and using a food scale to measure pets' food instead of cups, which I've always said, quarter cup, half cup, whatever. We all know those are a little bit open to interpretation. And so she was saying to avoid that, use a food scale, tell the clients to do that. Well, I don't allow a food scale in my house because that is like the gateway to me to measuring things and tracking things, and the My Fitness Pal app, which I refuse to have on my phone. I just want a handful of pretzels. I'm not going to count them. I don't want to weigh how much peanut butter I'm putting in my oatmeal. These are things that are not healthful for me. And if I had somebody tell me that I needed to weigh my pet's food every morning, that would create a real conflict in my brain, a cognitive dissonance about well, should I be doing this? And if I'm doing it for my pet, should I be doing it for myself? And it's a slippery slope there to being the trigger that makes somebody's brain start working in a way that is not good for them. And I just think we need to be a little bit more mindful of that when we're talking to clients, given that almost no one I know has a totally healthy relationship with food.
Yeah. And I think you touched on this too, Katie, but that shame part, that control part, where I think we can inadvertently fully place the blame on that pet owner, where in reality, I'm just thinking of you've got two different patients. You've got a Beagle and a Yorkie. It takes different amount of effort to keep one of them in a normal BMI than it does the other. And I feel like that just demonstrates the genetic differences that everyone is working with when it comes to appetite and weight and all of that good stuff. So yeah, I do think we could have a whole nother conversation on how our, messaging and discussions and all of that around pet weight and pet obesity, which of course we know can be an issue for many of our patients, but how that trickles into this discussion that we're having today.
Totally. And hopefully we will have that conversation, because I think it's really interesting and just makes us better, I think more relatable as humans if we acknowledge that these issues exist, rather than just pretending that the word obesity is not a really difficult word for a lot of us to hear. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, anything else on this, Beth? I think this is a loaded topic. We could talk all day, but
it is a loaded topic. But no, this is our New Year's reminder to you do you, ignore the New Year's resolutions if we need to. Make your own if you want to. I think Katie and I are both sitting out. I feel like I'm in too much of just, I don't know, life survival mode to be bothering with resolutions. So if that's you, we're just going to power through to January without any major shifts in our energy. So, but no, Katie, I think that brings us to our win of the week. Do you have any wins from this week?
Actually, I have a win of the week, which I think is a win.
Uh-oh.
I work relief now. I don't have set shifts generally. And I signed up to work a Friday evening shift at urgent care last Friday, which was Friday the 13th. And it was the weekend of a full moon. And it was right before the holidays. And I was going into the shift, past me was absolutely not paying any attention to the calendar when she signed up for this shift. I packed 3 meals, in my bag for this 8-hour shift and all this stuff. And I got in there and I was bracing myself. And I saw one patient the whole time. She had what I hope is an anal gland abscess and not a tumor.
Sure.
It was pretty large and firm, and so I'm hoping that it was an abscess. But she was real sweet, Boston Terrier, and treated her, sent her home, and that was it. And that was
That's
at
great.
4. And I was there till 11.
Anytime we can disprove the full moon Friday the 13th theories, I think you're giving a lot of people out there hope. No, I think that is, but were you bored? I feel like there's always that fine line of I don't want to see anything scary. I don't want to be too busy, and then boredom.
I generally like to be busy when I'm working because it makes the time go by so much faster.
Sure.
But I also came equipped, which I thought was going to be the kiss of death, right? I had a book, I had my laptop, I had my phone, and there's good internet there. And, the team is nice, but they actually said it's been pretty slow there. They actually said that when I walked in. That's how you know it's been slow, is if 2 vet techs look at you and
willing
they're
to
like, oh
say
yeah,
that.
it's been really slow at the beginning of a Friday night shift. But anyway, nobody got kicked out for saying that. But so everybody was just kind of doing their own thing and chatting periodically. And it was actually real chill. And I got to like read my book. And so I normally do like to be useful. And sometimes I feel really guilty if I'm not working hard. I think that's the carryover from ProSal, like production pay.
Yeah.
But I was there if they needed me. They just didn't come in.
I think that's a win. That's a win for you. It's a win for the pets of the community that we're healthy and happy at home.
Hopefully that's what that means. Yeah. We did get one call about a C-section that needed to be done. It was a bulldog, and we don't do surgery at urgent care. So luckily they called first,
Hopefully they found some other
slow
facility.
Anyway, so yeah, it was a win, and hopefully it was a win for the Boston too. And she's feeling better.
Yes, very good. That is a major win.
Yeah. How about you?
My win is that this weekend I went to a cat show.
Oh.
Have you ever been to a cat show?
When I was a kid, yeah.
I had been to one cat show before, but it had been a while. It's just good old-fashioned fun. So I recommend it to everyone. I know, of course, there's a lot of different feelings about breeding and purebreds and things like that. But I thought it was an interesting experience and just such a wild world. I mean, anybody that's seen the movie Best in Show, the cat world isn't that different. There were a bunch of cats from a shelter for adoption too, so I thought that was really nice. But it's just that they're judged, they get put on this table, and then the little wand gets waved, the little cat toy, and I of course have no idea what these judges are looking for or whatnot, but like the whole thing was just hysterical and adorable. And the cats, it was nice to see cats that were so happy and chill outside of their home. Clearly all these cats had been really well socialized, so they were all happy, just kind of hanging out all over the arena. So anyway, yeah, I went with one of my best friends, so we had a good wild middle-aged time.
I love it, like party time at the cat show. That's
right.
Amazing. I'm just imagining like the Best in Show is one of my favorite movies. I just love that movie. But just picturing like at least the dogs are sort of interactive, and I can just see the cats like sitting around just being like, nope, not interested. Like you can wave that thing all you want, but I'm not looking at it.
Some of them, it depended on the cat. So it was great time. Then we went to the Cheesecake Factory. So I mean, as if the cat show wasn't wild enough. But anyway.
Yeah, that's a win. And no one asked you for vet advice because no one knew.
Nope, no one knew.
So that is also a win.
Major. Actually, someone was there wearing, I won't say who, but wearing a corporate vet shirt. And I was like, God bless you, because you're going to get a lot of questions. But anyway, well, Katie, this was a great conversation. We want to wish everyone out there a happy new year, and we will catch you all next episode.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for joining us in the Veterinary Breakroom. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, including the video version on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. You can also listen to or watch our podcast episodes on our website at cliniciansbrief.com/podcasts, or drop us a line at podcasts@vetmedics.com. Veterinary Breakroom is a Vetmedics production, produced by Alexis Ussery and co-hosted by Dr. Alyssa Watson and Dr. Beth Molleson.